McKewon with the Omaha World-Herald, Big Red Today, and Omaha.com. It's been a busy day in Huskerville, mostly because Nebraska Athletic Director Bill Moos retired. He announced his retirement as of June 30th. And we were part of too many outlets to talk to Bill today about his decision. It was abrupt. It's a little bit mysterious. And we still don't have defined answers on exactly why it came out. We know a little bit about the timing, but why he had to retire June 30th. It is yet another turn in the sort of dramatic flywheel that's been going in Nebraska athletics really for a long time. One would say maybe it was 2003, maybe it was a little bit even before that. But it's just been a very dramatic athletic department for a while. And Moos's decision to retire, which is kind of forced upon him, at least the date was, at this moment, is just another thing that the student athletes at Nebraska have to deal with. Nebraska has not had a ton of success on the court, field, you name it, in the last however many years, with the exception of a couple of sports. And it's hard not to see that constant change and constant churn from an administrative perspective can contribute to that. There's been a lot of folks who have left the athletic department over the last 5 or 6 years, and every single time you have sort of a cog in the wheel leave, it's just another thing that has to be replaced, and it's another situation that student athletes or the coaches who coach them have to navigate. So Moos decided he was interested in retiring. He wanted to look at two parts of his contract. He did that. They discussed that. We don't know exactly what the payout's going to be for his deferred compensation bonus as of this moment. NU doesn't have the agreement. We don't know exactly who told him that he was going to be out, although, I think we have a pretty good idea it was somebody above him, right? Ronnie Green or Ted Carter or somebody in the regent's office. And so he's out. And he leaves having hired 12 coaches, including 3, Scott Frost, Will Bolt, and Fred Hoiberg, who are very high-profile coaches. He leaves having kind of restructured the athletic department with 2 of his senior deputy ADs, John Johnson and Garrett Classy, in place. I think Moos hired those 2 guys so that they kind of run the day-to-day operations, and Moos was a little further back and handling the media and handling fans, and honestly probably not around as much as he could have been or even should have been. He was a face for the athletic department other than Scott Frost and Fred Hoiberg. And Hoiberg, I think, handles, his business in basketball the way he handles it. He's the face of Nebraska basketball, and Fred's kind of the guy. If you look at the football program, Scott Frost, surprisingly, even though he's a native Nebraskan, is a little bit reticent, I think, at times, to necessarily be out there in front, when we've seen him at the sort of the building events or things like that. He kind of likes to stay off to the side, and there's Bill Moos giving the interviews. When the hardest things had to be said about the Big Ten, there was Bill Moos, the one who puts out the statement. When Nebraska, Oklahoma seems like it might have been in jeopardy, Bill Moos is out there. Bill Moos was in some ways a very public face for the athletic department. And as of June 30th, he isn't there anymore. And the public face of the athletic department is not the interim AD, Garrett Classy, who's a really good guy and I've enjoyed talking to over the last year or so, and has really helped put together not only NU's in-house marketing organization, but also its NIL program. But he's not the face of Nebraska athletics at this point. The primary faces for Nebraska athletics now are Scott Frost and Fred Hoiberg. And Hoiberg does not coach the biggest sport at Nebraska. Frost does. And so the question becomes, to some degree, as we move forward here, how do you get Nebraska football back on track? Well, Scott has a lot to do with that, and he's the one who's got to help that happen, and the players obviously do too. But who will be Scott Frost's boss? And will that person be the face of the athletic department the way that Bill Moos was? Moos's predecessor obviously wasn't. Sean Eichhorst didn't like it. He stayed in the shadows. He stayed in his office. He stayed he stayed back. And obviously the face of the athletic department during his time was either Bo Pelini or Mike Riley. Moos was different in that way. He was much, much more public. In that way, he was a little bit more like Tom Osborne, who obviously was the face of the athletic department when he was the AD as well. Steve Peterson tried to be the face of the athletic department. That didn't go that well for him. And he ultimately kind of crashed and burned. I, of course, tried to do the opposite of Peterson. That didn't really work. Moos was very popular with fans. If you look at a poll on our website today of how the kind of job he did, I think 65-70% of folks gave him an A and a B. And let's be honest, the football and basketball hires haven't worked out yet. They might work out. I would predict that at least one of them will work out, but they haven't worked out yet. And there was enough going on when Moos was there that, not everything was smooth. Not everything was perfect. So his popularity in part is due to his clear and evident love for Nebraska, his ability to get out in the public and say things and be a part of the community and to genuinely enjoy his time as the athletic director, which I think people could sense. And then his willingness to fight for Nebraska verbally when he would do that. So he would often do that where he would, take on the Big Ten, or he would talk tough during, prior to the first season. He was just a strong talker. And at the end of the day, fans looked forward to knowing what he thought about things. His radio show was often a pleasing listen, and people would call in. Oftentimes, Moos would get more phone calls than some of the coaches who had coaches' shows. So he was a very popular figure in that way. And his departure basically put Scott Frost back in that spot. And he's a coach. He's not the AD, and he's not a public relations firm. And so you can't necessarily expect him to necessarily fill that void. Although I think in the time between Moos's departure, which is pretty much immediate, he leaves on Monday, and them hiring a new athletic director, it would be good, I think, if Frost had more of a public voice. Don't know when he's going to talk again. Hard to say. Put out a statement today. And then the question becomes, who do Frost and Hoiberg answer to? That'll be a key question as you look forward to the next athletic director. I think that's going to be one of the biggest issues to explore. Is the next athletic director somebody from very far inside the operation, deep inside the operation already, and who in effect is working as a supporting staff to the main coaches at the university and kind of working behind the scenes and making it work? Is it somebody that Hoiberg and or Frost know very well, probably more likely Frost, and somebody that they've already worked with for a very long time? Or is it a true outside candidate who really has had no real connection to the Nebraska athletic department and would come in and essentially be, assessing these guys and trying to figure out if things are going to work or not? Moos was essentially brought in to fire Mike Riley. Most people thought that Mike Riley was going to be fired. He was. He deserved it. He was, 4-8 in his third year. That wasn't going to work. But Moos was brought in with a mission as it related to football. And on basketball, I think people had grown a little tired of Tim Miles. I'm not sure if that was fair or not, but they had grown a little fatigued. And so he had kind of free reign there too. Any new AD that comes in, it's probably not going to have quite as much. I mean, Frost and Hoiberg have a lot of cachet within the athletic department, especially Frost. And so it'll be interesting to see how Nebraska approaches the hire. You can either approach the hire with an internal candidate. You can approach the hire as an external candidate and just go somebody way off the map that hasn't been around or, doesn't really know Nebraska and is coming in here as an AD that works somewhere else, like a John Cunningham, who grew up in Lincoln, but has worked at Minnesota and Cincinnati and other places, or a Beth Getz. That would be another option. Even Jamie Pollard or some other option nationally. You could go with somebody who's really on the inside. So Garrett Classy would be an example of that. Johnson, Matt Davison, the associate athletic director for football, who raised a lot of the money for the football building. He'd be somebody that you would obviously look at. Or there's sort of an in-between candidate, right? So there's somebody like Trev Alberts or Ed Stewart, who is an associate commissioner with the Big 12 and obviously played a lot of football in Nebraska, was a team captain on the 94 team, one of the greatest Huskers of all time. Trev is one of the greatest Huskers of all time as well, but they haven't really been around Nebraska football. Trev's up in UNO, Ed Stewart's with the Big 12. that's sort of a candidate where you're like, this person knows Nebraska football because they lived it, but they haven't really been around it in recent years. So there's kind of three tiers there. If you had to ask me, I think an external candidate way outside the box would be interesting, but Sean Eichhorst and Bill Moos were way outside the box. An internal candidate would be interesting because you could kind of just go smoothly into the season and everything's just sort of business as usual. But what happens if one of these teams, the football or the men's basketball team, doesn't turn the corner? What do you do? Do you have somebody in place who, can go out and hire somebody to replace the guys that were absolutely supposed to work? And we're not saying that that's going to happen with those two teams, but you have to think about that as you're processing a hire, right? And then there's that middle ground of ex-Husker football players who have been really successful elsewhere, but haven't been around that long or haven't been around here that much. And the question becomes there, okay, well, they kind of know what's going on, but at the same time, they're not necessarily answering to sort of an internal system that has already been in place for a while. So we'll see. I think it's going to be an interesting search. I don't know that it's going to take that long. I don't know that it's going to resolve itself in 48 hours unless they're hiring a truly internal candidate. I think that there'll be some momentum for Classy, who was the AD at Illinois Chicago and has done a lot already at Nebraska and is a pretty well-liked guy. There'll be momentum for Matt Davison. He's really good with the public, and he understands his place. He understands both programs really well, the men's basketball program too. And there might be some momentum for a guy like John Cook, who probably doesn't want to stop coaching. And so it would be kind of hard to have him do this. But you never know. So there'll be momentum for lots of different people. It should be interesting to watch. What I do know is that when you make this hire, you hope to make it with stability in mind. This is not somebody that you're putting in for a 1 or 2 year period. You want to have some kind of stability going forward. And you also want to have a situation where that person, whoever that person is, feels empowered to run the athletic department and not just occasionally be a middle managing consultant while people above him make the more important decisions. Him or her, I should say. Above him or her make the more important decisions. That'll be something that Nebraska is going to have to watch, because I think for a while now, the people above that athletic director spot have enjoyed weighing in. And sooner or later, you get what we've gotten, which is a lot of athletic directors in the last 15 years. We'll find out where it goes from here. All right, Husker fans, I'm Sam McKewon with the Omaha World-Herald, Big Red Today, and Omaha.com. Take a look at all our work. We're going to have plenty of it. Thanks a lot.